What's up, guys? I want to talk about your shoe choices and how it affects the Achilles. Now, we're going to focus on the Achilles, but this goes for knee problems and hip problems and back problems. All the way up the body, we're going to experience the effects from our shoe choices. So the first thing you have to understand is basketball shoes are necessary. It's not like we can go play barefoot. You guys always hear me say humans are meant to be barefoot. The problem is humans aren't meant to be cutting a million times on a hardwood floor or running on cement. So we have all of these man-made surfaces, which then requires things like basketball shoes, shoes with more padding. So not that there's anything wrong with this specific brand of shoe. I actually like playing in these and I think they look dope. But what I want you guys to understand is when we look at a basketball shoe, we're gonna have a big heel lift and then it's gonna gradually slope down, okay? It's almost like this. This is an exaggerated version of what a basketball shoe is in terms of big heel lift. Our heel is off the ground and then our toe is closer to the ground. And these are lifting shoes. This is actually designed so that you can get lower in a squat. It takes away the ankle mobility limitations so you can get lower in a squat. And then obviously on the opposite end of the spectrum, we got the Vibram Barefoot, the 5 toes. And so this is gonna be very flexible. This is the closest shoe that you can get to actual barefoot. You guys see me jumping 40 something inches in these all the time. I don't recommend that, but I've worn them so much that over time, over the last like 5 years, I've adapted so that I can pretty much run on concrete and I can play on hardwood in these. I actually wear these because the traction is so good. But most of you guys, if you tried to do that, you'd probably get injured. And then these that I have on, these are the Vivo Barefoot. So it's similar to these, except it's a little bit more of a real shoe. And so I can go step on hard stuff and it's not gonna hurt. But it is basically a barefoot shoe. And most importantly, it's a zero drop shoe. And this is what you wanna spend most of your time in. A zero drop shoe means that the heel is not higher than the toe. So it's flat throughout. You know how they used to play in Chuck Taylors? No, it didn't have lateral support. The traction probably was nowhere near what it is today, yet the injury rates were lower. Well, because it's a flat shoe, so we're not compromising the calf and the Achilles. So if I'm walking around and spending majority of my time either barefoot or in a zero drop shoe, well, now my calf and my Achilles are not overly shortened. So they're optimally lengthened. I have good length through the Achilles. Think about like a kangaroo. They have this good length through the Achilles. If they shortened it, one, they would decrease their ability to store and release elastic energy. But two, then when they need that actual length and they go to get that length, it would probably snap. And so when we spend a lot of time in shoes, and when I think back to when I was in high school, I played for probably 3 hours a day in shoes like this. And then I walked around at school in these, and then I probably got home and threw on a different pair of these and went outside and shot around. So I was constantly in shoes like this. So eventually your calf and Achilles are going to adapt. So if my heel is elevated, my Achilles and my calf is going to start to shorten. So I'm not gonna be at optimal length. And then all of a sudden I get into a negative step and I need it to maximally lengthen and I don't have that length, I'm too shortened. That's when we get the Achilles tears and Achilles tendinopathies and stuff like that. So again, at the end of the day, basketball shoes are necessary. We're not saying basketball shoes are bad. When you're playing basketball and you're making near max cuts and jumps, you wanna be in basketball shoes, but what we spend majority of our time in throughout the day probably shouldn't be Air Jordans, okay? So grab the shoes that you're spending the most time in throughout the day. You're walking around class or wherever you are, you're at work, grab them, ask yourself, can you bend them? Can this touch this? The answer is no. Can you spin it? No. Can you spin it this way? No. Okay, so I probably shouldn't be spending majority of my time in that shoe. Now let's put this through the test. Can I touch toe towards heel? Easy. Can I twist? Easy. Can I twist the other way? Easy. This is a flexible shoe. Obviously with this, it's gonna be even easier. I can twist. So this is a very flexible shoe. This is gonna be good for my foot function and it's a zero drop shoe. And so I'm gonna put my calf and my Achilles in an optimal resting length so that I'm not overly shortened by the time I get on the court. Now, the other thing that we want to check for is the toe box. So in all basketball shoes, we have this narrow toe box, which is probably optimal for performance. In these shoes, you notice that we have a wide toe box, right? So this allows my toes to kind of splay out the way that they naturally should. And if I'm walking barefoot, if you spend a lot of time barefoot, a lot of times you'll naturally see your toes start to splay out. We shouldn't have toes on toes. A lot of basketball players these days, when you look at their feet, they have toes on toes. So they'll have like toes like this, and they're just like stacked on top of each other because they're spending so much time in these narrow toe boxes. If you've ever looked at like certain indigenous tribes, you'll see their feet and they look almost like hands, right? They look like so splayed apart and so spread apart with the toes, they almost look like hands. We can't get there. Our genetics have evolved so far that you're not gonna get to that point, even if you spent your whole life barefoot, just because it's been passed down generation after generation. That's why when we're born as kids, we don't have that huge splay. We're already like this, but then you fit it into narrow toe boxes and now you get even more and more narrow. And then the ladies get in high heels and it gets even worse. And so if you can walk around barefoot, or you can walk around in something like this, the Vivo Barefoot, your toes are gonna be able to naturally splay out a little bit, and that's good for overall foot function. And then the final piece is developing that optimal arch, right? Some of us genetically do have flat feet, but most of us should have a little bit of an arch, and yes, too high of an arch can also be a bad thing. But these shoes are so supportive, and the soles are so stiff that if we spend all of our time in these shoes, these muscles don't have to work. So we got like the posterior tibialis and these intrinsic muscles in the feet that work to pull the arch up. But if the support comes from elsewhere, if the support comes from the shoe or the support comes from your insoles, well, then those muscles start to turn off because there's no need for them to be activated throughout the day. Whereas if I'm walking around barefoot or in something that's flexible like this, those muscles have to be constantly engaged to pull the arch up, which gets the foot that structural support. And so a lot of things go wrong once we start to lose that arch. And so it all comes down to just getting back to basics and getting back to being barefoot more often than not throughout the day. So some quick practical advice, because if you guys go straight to zero drop shoes, or the Vibram Barefoot 5 fingers, a lot of times people get overuse injuries because their feet are so far gone. So practical advice, start really small. Wear your normal shoes, but spend an extra 20-30 minutes walking around per day in the barefoot shoes, right? Or completely barefoot. And then just take it up, 5 or 10 minutes each week, and just make it a gradual transition until you get to the point where you can completely get rid of the stiff-soled shoes. Obviously outside of in your sport, outside of if you're playing basketball, you're still gonna wear those. But you should be able to completely remove stiff-soled shoes from the rest of your day, even from your jogs when you're going out for a jog. When you're working out in the weight room, we should be able to work out in shoes like this. And so make it a gradual transition. Maybe it's 5 minutes more, or maybe it's 10 minutes more per day. Now, the other thing is there's also times where you got to completely get rid of shoes and you got to get rid of socks. And basketball players wear the thickest socks, and it basically puts the sensors of our feet to sleep. We have these proprioceptors in our feet that are sensing everything as we walk, as we take a step. They're sensing everything, and they're sending information up the body. And so a lot of times you have mechanical errors in the hips or in the knees, all because your foot positioning, your feet don't know what position they're in because the sensors are being put to sleep by our shoes and by our socks. And so we got to get out of the socks, and you got to walk on natural surfaces. So walk on the grass, right? Grass is unbelievable because it's not perfectly flat. It's a little bit uneven, and so the intrinsic muscles in your feet have to react every step. So that's great for building your arch and awakening those proprioceptors that are put to sleep. So walk on grass, walk on rough terrain. So this one is really hard. You won't be able to do this right away, but gradually progress to this point. If you could find like a bed of rocks, like small rocks that aren't sharp, make sure that they're smooth and round to start, and just go walk on them. It hurts at first a little bit, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's unbelievable for waking up those proprioceptors. Walk on sand, walk on dirt, anything that is a natural surface that hunter-gatherers would be expected to walk on barefoot. You should get your feet used to walking on those surfaces, and that's gonna go a really long way for your overall foot health. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. Please hit it with a thumbs up and leave your comments below. Any questions you have, we'll try to address in future videos. Until next time, I'm out.